recorded
Yes.
here.
Well, welcome everybody. I hope everybody had a good lunch. We're on the second half of the second day of this conference, and we've got a great panel here and a great topic to talk about a lot of things that were relevant to a lot of the previous conversations we had over the course of this conference. And so ultimately, we saw some remarkable technologies. We saw some very impressive products, but no matter how deep the technology is or how amazing and whatever wow factor that product has, at the end of the day, validation of that technology or product is a key step towards moving forward. And so today we're going to be talking about a lot of these different topics that are relevant to validation and the efficacy of each of these different technologies. And we see that this is relevant to a lot of the different themes that we saw over the course of the past 2 days, whether it was optimizing athletic performance and identifying those key metrics in order to figure out what is going to actually translate to an improvement on the athletic field, or in the digital therapeutics session yesterday, where we're looking at data and the ability to verify and validate these technologies that are beyond the pill, as Tom Insel put it, are going to actually work. And so we've got a remarkable panel here that I'm really excited to get into a conversation with, and I'm going to introduce each of them. But before I do that, I'd like to just take an audience poll and just get a sense, who here outside of this conference has used a digital technology to improve or assess their brain health? Can I just get a show of hands? Okay, it's good, about 25% it looks like. How about using a EEG device to improve, more specifically, your brain health or wellness? Okay, looks like we're down maybe about 10%. Virtual reality of some sort? Also about 10%. And finally, transcranial stimulation of some sort, whether it's magnetic stimulation, direct current stimulation. Okay, and this is probably the smallest, just a handful of people. Perfect. Well, I think this is great because we're going to get a sense of the validation behind these technologies and some of these different aspects and techniques that you can use in your day-to-day practice if you're on the fence about using these, or if you've already been using it to bolster confidence in the technologies you've been doing. So I'll just briefly introduce each of our panelists. We've got Howard Rose. Howard is the CEO of Deepstream VR. And in today's day and age where there's lots of different technology companies that are talking about virtual reality, Howard is anything but a Me Too company. He actually has been working in the area of VR all the way back to 1996, where he was working with Firsthand Technologies, served as the president and the director in that role. So really excited to hear Howard's perspectives on some of these things. We've got Nuri Javid here. He's the CMO at Emotive Life Sciences, and he's responsible as a CMO for growing the company, the sales, the marketing, the branding, and communicating the value to each of the consumers. So it's not simply the objective sense of whether or not this particular technology or application is useful, but also conveying to the consumers and the healthcare providers these things. So I'm really excited to hear Nuri's thoughts on this topic. We've also got Chris Burka. Chris Burka is the CEO of Advanced Brain Monitoring. And Chris has not only expertise from a business and executive function, but she's been involved in a number of different research publications and studies. And through our work at Sharp Brains, we've identified her as a named inventor on over 2,000 patents. So she's got technical prowess in addition to these business executive experiences. So we're really looking forward to hearing her thoughts on this topic. Finally, we have James Poole. James Poole is the CEO of Solus Life Science, and that makes the NeuroCom product. And NeuroCom has a number of different applications and use cases ranging from dental visits to muscle recovery. But one of the focuses that I'm really excited to hear about is on sleep and improved sleep. I'm somebody that naps literally every single day, and so anything we can do to validate technology is going to help me sleep better is something I want to hear more about. With that introduction, I'd like to just kind of kick off the panel and have each of you talk about what are some of the things that you're working on and you're excited about as we move forward.
Deepstream is bringing virtual reality to a lot of areas of healthcare, and our primary focus is in pain relief. And it's really exciting to be here and talking about validation. We've been working for 2 decades on trying to figure out what it is about VR that works and is effective in the healthcare, across the healthcare spectrum of mental health and lifestyle change and physical health. And we have a lot of great data. Pain relief happens to be a great way to try to understand what is happening with VR. And I like to think about it as sort of mind over molecule. That we can give people a molecule, we can give you a drug and get an effect. But what you find is that we have a lot of capacity internal capacity that we really don't take advantage of. And virtual reality, it engages people in that process. It's immersive, it's interactive, and we can manipulate that environment sort of endlessly and really try to understand perception and behavior in a different way. So some of the since we're talking about validation, we've there's a great body of literature of clinical studies, a lot of which we've been involved with applications like Snow World and things like that. You get a very big effect size, which is really exciting, and 50% reductions, 60, 70% reductions of pain for very difficult patients, which is by comparison, sort of 30% reductions is a dose of morphine. So you're getting really high levels, and what's exciting is that you can bring behavior and interaction and all of that to bear. So I'd be happy to share more of the data, but that's what we're up to.
Perfect, fantastic. Nuri?
Well, our mission is quite simple, and we want to advance understanding of the human brain. And we're doing that through three main areas of activity. The first is that we want to embolden our presence in the research and the scientific community. We've done a very, very good job of supporting those communities worldwide, bringing pretty high resolution EEG devices at an incredibly, comparatively low cost. The data that we're extracting from that helps to support all sorts of other innovations. We are at the same time working to bring our technology into other existing devices. So everything that we've learned about sensitive materials, sensing and detection algorithms and everything else, so bringing those into existing technology. So we're talking to a number of different, all sorts of things that you couldn't even imagine right now, which is very, very exciting. And the third is that we are bringing to market a consumer device in the first quarter of next year. So using all of the data, all the intelligence that we've derived through our scientific work, and building that into what we think will be a highly effective consumer device, and making it such that it would be as seamless and as invisible as a Fitbit.
Great, perfect, excellent. Chris?
Thanks. So we're a medical device manufacturer, and we've actually been in business now for 16 years. And maybe we were somewhat prescient in that our mission statement 16 years ago was to develop mobile, scalable, wearable sensing devices focusing on the brain and the brain's electrical activity, but also for cardiorespiratory parameters and as well as a number of other sensing devices. We've brought now 7 products through FDA clearance. We focus on sleep, so we have home sleep products, medical devices, and then we have our daytime EEG products that span neurology, psychiatry, psychology. We work quite a bit with the pharmaceutical industry in clinical trials, so we can drop ship our sensor systems anywhere in the world. And then we have our cloud portal, so every day we're getting data in from all over the world on sleep and daytime EEG assessments for studies of Alzheimer's, mild cognitive impairment, Huntington's disease, a number of the neurological diseases, as well as sleep-related disorders. We've also been very fortunate in that we've received quite a bit of government grant support, and that support has allowed us to really branch out and get into areas that are beyond the medical boundaries. So if you heard Amy Cruz's presentation on the marksmanship trainer, that was a device that we developed as part of a DARPA project. So accelerating training of marksmanship using EEG-based sensor technology. We have many, many partnerships. I encourage you, if you want to build an FDA, if you have an app that you want to build that's EEG-based and you want to go through FDA, we'd love to partner with you. And even if you're not planning to go through FDA, we might be able to partner with you as well. So it's a pleasure to be here. This is a very exciting meeting for us.
Fantastic, excellent. James?
So NeuCalm is a simple solution to a complex problem. And we have a singular purpose: to lower stress and improve sleep quality without drugs. Who here feels like our culture is a little far on the stress continuum? It's incredible. We play in the stress role. According to the American Psychological Association, we're living in the second great age of anxiety. I don't think that's a badge of honor. First one was after World War I, so we're in a transformative age. Today, we are more stressed out than we were during the Great Depression when we couldn't feed our families. Doesn't make any sense. And you look at the data, the most alarming aspect is the #1 stressed out demographic today are our youth. Now, we were raised to take care of our youth and create a better life for our kids. We're not. So you take a look at what's the ideology of what's going on here. Technology advancement. Who here ever takes a break anymore? Only when you're in remote areas where your phone doesn't work do you get to take a deep breath. Who here travels and keeps their phone on and you're constantly waking up? Who here believes our food is food anymore? So you look at our food supply, you look at our pace, you look at technology, we have a big problem. NeuroWellness solves that problem using biochemistry and physics, 4 components, 2 minutes to administer. We're going to bring your brainwave function down to theta, and for those of you who understand theta, you know that's the healing zone. 7 hertz down to 4 hertz is when the cells restore themselves, clean their toxins out, and we get rejuvenation. So we can make each of you a meditating monk in 4 minutes. That's our value proposition. And I'm totally excited to be here, and I'm not stressed out. I knew calm this morning.
You heard it here, folks. Meditating monk in 4 minutes. That's pretty impressive. That's not bad. That's not bad. So this is really, really fascinating. I mean, when I think about stress, you know, tens of thousands of years ago, out on the savannah, stress served us well. It was adaptive. You know, it was allowing us to deal with situations where we were in fight or flight, we were either hunting or being hunted. And after that 5 minutes of engagement, it was either over, and we suspended during that time our ability to heal ourselves, to be reproductive, and those were things we save for later if there was going to be a later. But today, what was adaptive has now become maladaptive, and there's chronic stress that's causing serious problems. So how do we delineate between stress that may be good and may be healthy, or at least at healthy levels, versus stress that isn't as healthy? And what are the different ways that we should be using to assess or measure these various stress levels? And I'll just throw that out to the entire panel.
Well, the first thing is identifying those moments that validate good stress from bad stress, so correlating different functions. We did a test recently with the ESPN on a very big quarterback called Paxton Lynch. I'm not a football fan, so I didn't know who he was, but he's a monster of a guy. And they put him under an extremely stressful situation where he had 4 very, very large heavy bags coming at him, 4 very large guys coming at him, 3 flashing hoops waiting until one of them went steady green, and he had to throw a football in through them from about 60 yards. So I would cave under that or get hit by someone. And looking at what's happening in his brain, he's wearing an emotive insight at the time, his stress levels were through the roof. I mean, heart attack territory. At the same time, his focus was near perfect. So in that situation, as he said, he's hunting. His stress is serving him well, and what we're able to do with the EEG is identify those moments where stress is serving us well. I think what's happened, and with technology being so invasive, is we've lost sight of where technology is, or where stress is bad. We don't know it's happening, and by the time we can feel it, we're already in hyperanxiety. It's too late, right? So low-level stresses are what really causes us damage, that constant low-level stress that we get from not just technology, but overpopulation and traffic and nagging and whatever, TV, flashing lights, all sorts of things. And it's a matter of us being aware of what those functions are.
Right.
So the validation part of it can help us do that.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
And I think that's the beauty of these technology platforms, is that they give you awareness of things that are normally subconscious. So who's aware of their heart rate, or even more of their brain changes? As soon as you get some feedback on those systems, then you can become aware of your stress responses, and awareness is the first step to controlling them.
Yes.
And then once you learn to control them, you want to be able to do that across environments.
Quantitatively, we look at heart rate variability. And more specifically, we want to really address the autonomic nervous system. So we're looking at total power, which is a quantitative measure of the autonomic nervous system, and dive deep into that to the LF-HF ratio. LF being low frequency and sympathetic nervous system, HF being high frequency parasympathetic. We want balance. We want a seesaw, and what we see is no balance. We see sympathetic discharge moving towards adrenal fatigue. So we look at HRV, and there's a lot of athletes and a lot of performers who look at HRV. We want to see the complexity of the organism, but I really want to see, are you getting any parasympathetic balance in your autonomic nervous system?
Fantastic. And so one of the themes that I'm hearing across each of these different possibilities is that we're really looking at stress on an individualized level, because we're looking at sample sizes of 1 to identify what's happening, because it sounds to me like that what may be stressful for some people may not be stressful for others. Chris, I know that you've worked with a lot of folks that are in very sort of extreme environments and work in extreme situations. Can you speak to a little bit about how we're able to better intervene with people depending on how they have various stress reactions?
Sure. Yeah, so part of that marksmanship project that we did was we had a group of expert marksman coaches from the Marines. They came in and they demonstrated repeatedly nearly perfect control of their heart and their brain. And we saw them go into this, what we called the pre-shot peak performance state, and they were able to do it at will. And they described it as if they had a little switch. They knew when they were moving in and out of that state. They could do it under combat scenario or any stressful situation. They had perfect control over that. And we've seen that now. We've done a number of expert versus novice studies, and that is a characteristic across experts, whether it's athletes. We've studied expert chemists, we've studied leaders in business and military, and that ability to both be aware of your physiology and then control it, even in the most stressful environments, is associated with expertise across a number of different domains. So that is trainable, and I think all of us, many of us in this room, have approaches for eliciting and training awareness and control of those physiological parameters. So, and sleep, you mentioned sleep. Having studied, many people sleep and sleep architecture, most people don't sleep enough, number one, and most people have a really hard time getting to sleep. And that's true of very young, healthy people, and also, some of the athletes that we've talked to who everything else in their lives are perfect, but they are having a hard time with sleep. So anything that we can do to help to improve sleep is going to improve performance and improve stress levels. It's a really critical, important, focus.
Great.
It's a vicious cycle. If
Yeah.
you don't manage stress, your restorative sleep's compromised.
Right.
When your restorative sleep's compromised, you don't manage stress well the next day. This cyclicality continues, and then what happens is we break down on a cellular level, right down to the mitochondria, and then we start attacking our organs. 95% of all diseases known to mankind are accelerated, exacerbated, or created from stress. It's like this insidious, hidden little monster. And what's crazy and fascinating about stress is everyone in this room has an intimate relationship with stress. We've had it since we were kids. We don't talk a lot about it. We don't tell people what we worry about, what our self-doubt is. Even to our spouses and friends, we're not that intimate. But we know when we're not functioning well. We know when cortisol activates and changes our emotional dysfunction, right? We know when we make decisions or we turn little things into huge things. And then we start and say, well, why did I do that? So this sleep pattern, stress management pattern is pivotal to balance and homeostasis for all of us.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, and I think that being able to quantify and to be aware of that stress and leveraging data in order to do that, it seems like it's a key step and it's a key enabler, because ultimately you can't manage what you can't measure, and being aware that these things are happening at a physiological level is very important to making that first step. So one of the themes that I've heard throughout this conference is the importance of data and the ability to use data. They're talking about, for example, at the peak performance panel, that some of these companies actually think of themselves first and foremost as data companies. There's Hale in Neuroscience that had said this. So maybe we can speak a little bit about the role that data is playing in validating NeuroWellness. And Howard, I know that your company has done a lot of work, and there's a lot of great data even available on your website. Can you talk a little bit about the role that data has played in validating NeuroWellness?
Yeah, I would be happy to. I just would like to add a little comment here that I think I would totally agree with what's been said. I'd also add that knowledge is necessary but not sufficient for change. And we've done a lot of work in many areas of health. And if you take PTSD, we've done applications for the Department of Defense trying to use, trying to address battlefield PTSD with soldiers who come back from Iraq and Afghanistan. And these people have a lot of resistance to sitting and talking about their problems. And so VR, I like to think of it as VR as a way to turn talk therapy into action therapy. Instead of coming head on and saying, you've got a problem, and addressing it in that fashion, it's like you take them there, and VR gets beyond that boundary and that barrier. And we can see that in both mental health and also physical health as well. So I think that there's a lot. The other point that I would just like to address before I answer your question is that I think that if you look at the broad landscape of healthcare, 20% of the population uses 80% of the services and has the cost. And so, yes, if I am a middle class person who has the accessibility, the access to the treatment and all of that, and I value that, then I'll respond to that. But there's a lot of people who live very stressed out lives who are working 2 jobs, and I think that we need to really think about who we are trying to treat and what their capacity is. Not that, I love all of your solutions. I use the emotive, I think it's great. But I think that we need to think about that context. And in terms of the data that we've been able to get, dealing with, for example, we've got a study that was just completed at a chronic pain clinic in Tennessee with very, middle America, people who have a lot of various chronic pain problems. We're seeing 60 to 70% reductions in pain from very short duration interventions. And the exciting thing is that actually lasts, after they take the helmet off, that lasts between 2 hours and 2 days. So we're having people have, extended
benefits.
Benefits and relief. And so it's really interesting to think about that, about what our attitude and our physical and our mental attitude is about pain and treatment. And we're really, at the essence, trying to move from a treatment model, which says you go to the doctor and they treat you, to using digital health as a way to kind of access our own ability and then really try to actualize that into something.
I think if I can pick up on what, I think you're dead right that half of these technologies, most technologies actually aren't the solution. They are, apart from yours, you'll argue against that. Ours, raising awareness is just the first part towards figuring out what the solution is. And you're right, again, about who we're treating. Most of the technologies that we're developing can't reach most of the people we would love to reach. So it will be about, and it goes into your point about data, the data is going to be so important to hopefully influence policy, to influence how we educate our children. We test our children from a young age. That is ridiculous. Kids are under stress to study and test at the age of 7. That is insane. So no wonder they're not sleeping. No wonder they're getting stressed out and they're already starting to get, conditions that were unheard of when I was a kid, when at school we painted and we threw crap at each other. So, it's the first part.
What school did he go to?
The first part is detection. The next part is intelligence and insights and gathering data, putting the data together as well. And what I'd like to say is, we all are involved in some, I hate to say it, but probably small parts of the larger problem, the larger solution. And if the data can be combined in some way, if a platform, a body, probably the government, probably someone like the FDA, who can create a platform for us to combine. If we can also have very open attitudes about sharing data, we're all very paranoid about keeping our data, and even the organizations on the clinical level, hospitals, and even clinics within the hospitals don't want to let go of the data. Of course, it can be seen as quite dangerous, but the solution ultimately will be to figure out context. Other factors, it's not just about, and why we've taken EEG to the streets is to get better data, more contextual data. Now add that with everything else, heart rate, sweat, everything, motion. That's where it can start to get really powerful. And programs like what you guys are building, and then ultimately influence policy. And I think, that's a bigger conversation, but that's a really important first step.
Right. Chris or James, do you have anything to add to that?
Oh, I have the 2 competing thoughts. One, I think we're already starting to see, and I'm sure you have done this as well, but we like to donate used equipment to the schools. So I think you will begin to see gradually, whether it's VR or some simple EEG monitoring and feedback systems, they need to be in the schools. And then, this technology, there's no reason that it can't be accessible very early in life. You're right, we do need more awareness and understanding, but I do think we're going to see this technology get into the school systems and be used, for stress control or for identifying sleep issues or attention deficit disorder. It's already starting to happen, and not just for the upper classes. Hopefully it becomes more ubiquitous. In terms of data, we are sitting on mountains of data. Having done this for 16 years, we have over 100,000 EEG records. We have, with our partner SleepMed, 500,000 sleep studies. The hard part, and we try to make it accessible, so we have a data sharing agreement. I love when graduate students come to me and say, I want to do a thesis project, can I use some of your data? Happy to do that. But organizing it and collating it and making it into a searchable, usable database is not trivial. No. So we have a lot of data. We're open to sharing that data, but with the caveat that it might not be organized exactly the way that you would like to have it. So that's, I think, the challenge with big data, especially physiological data, which is raw EEG data. They're very large files, and what are you going to do with them? How do they need to be labeled and structured?
Exactly, and I think it came up at some point in time over the past couple of days that these providers, these payers, they're not looking for more information. They want either less information or the right information.
Less, yeah.
So, exactly.
In the medical domain, they actually want less. Give me the report. Yeah. I don't want to see the data.
That's right. So I guess this sort of lends itself to a follow-up question. What type of data should we be collecting? Does it need to be data that's collected under randomized control trials? Can it be simply observational data, and then we're able to draw correlations from that? Is there any specific type of data that will help us validate more than other types of data techniques?
I would like to see personalized data. Okay? We can lose a lot of time trying to commercialize something, going backwards down the value chain, trying to do double-blind studies. Data's great. It's a door opener, it's a non-starter, especially as you're bringing novel things to the world. I get all that. In God we trust, everybody else bring data. I get that. But to the consumer, they don't care about the data. They don't want to see LF-HF ratios and autonomic nervous system, HRV. What is it? Why is it important? What's it going to do for me? How much does it cost? How do I use it? But the personalized data, showing me galvanic skin response or some way to measure my stress response, say, hey, you're out of whack, that is powerful, and we've been down that track for the last several years. We're, as a consuming world, starting to understand the power of personalized data. That's where I think the power of data comes into play. And adoption. How do we get habitual changes? How do we get people to say, hey, stress is a problem, how do I change that? We're in 7 industries. I can tell you our issue. Us, if we're not in chronic disease state, or professional athlete or pilot, we're not doing it. Why? Because we override it because our to-do list starts us in the morning. But if you're dying of cancer, you're using NeuroCalm every day. If you have a neurodegenerative disease, you're using this every day. If you have multiple sclerosis, you're using this every day. If you're a professional athlete, we say all these professional athletes are not that educated. Maybe not, but they know their body better than anybody. And it's their currency. And their ritualistic is incredible. When we started a pilot with professional quarterbacks in 2011, I said, no, do this 4 or 5 times a week. 2 weeks in, we said, okay, how many times have you done it? 18. Huh? Listen, it's working. I don't know if you know how athletes work, but if it works, we're going to do it. So we see an adoption curve based on the medical need. It's really difficult to create a habit. So if I have data that says you're out of whack, maybe that'll facilitate that habitual change.
Absolutely, feedback leading right into it. Howard?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about what VR is the physical manifestation of data. It is, a lot of the sort of basic research around VR is how you turn large data sets into something that is meaningful. And that has to do with our body and our physiology, and everything is sort of a metaphor. So in the environments that we create, we're showing one that you play with fireflies, and that's sort of a visualization that you can engage your body and your mind, and it's around, it's driven by, it's a biofeedback system, so it's driven by your ability to lower your heart rate and remain calm. I think that the issue is the data is great, but what does it mean to me and how do I use it? And if I just present a sheet of numbers, your quarterbacks are your football players or whatever are a great example. It either works or it doesn't. And for them, that's their litmus test, right? But I think you have two problems. One is the sort of FDA problem about what is the standard and the standard, the traditional standard of the randomized control study and the blind study and all of that. We really need to, I think, as a society, move away from that and to a certain extent and be able to develop more relevant kinds of measures for this kind of personalized medicine, because my body is not the same as anybody else's body, and what works for me, otherwise we get average medicine. It's like, there's a great story, Tom Furness, who's the founder of what I would say legitimately the founder of VR, he says, if you look at shirts, a very simple thing like shirts, and they've done this in the military, they take shirt sizes and they take a large size and it's got a collar, and the shirts don't fit anybody. There is nobody that's actually the size of a typical shirt, which is a great example. Now you think about the medication that you're getting, everything's average medicine. So I think we need measures that are good that are relevant to personalized medicine, and we need a way to present the data to the general public and to doctors in a way that is meaningful and not just sort of bowl them over with numbers.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And actually, one question I think is really relevant to the collection of folks that we have here is that folks that are entrepreneurs, folks that are technology leaders, people that are in this field of neurowellness, what techniques can they use to communicate the value of these different interventions to their consumers or to healthcare providers? Because oftentimes it's based off of data that may be too cumbersome or too complicated to communicate simply. Oftentimes it's based off of complex underlying neuroscientific principles. So what techniques, and by the way, as sort of an add-on to this question, to what techniques people can employ to getting their products out in the market and to communicating the value and the fact there's validity. Or we've talked a lot about the FDA at this conference. Earlier in this year, at the beginning of this year, Lumosity was fined $2 million by the FTC, not the FDA, for communication and for making claims that, according to the FTC, were exaggerated, not supported by the science. So navigating between conveying the benefits and those benefits that are justified, as well as making sure that everything is sort of kosher with the government's regulations and policies.
That's a great question, and all of our butts pucker up. It's great. It's a great question. Right? Don't make claims you can't back with science.
Yeah,
it's really simple. For us, we lower stress and improve sleep quality. Wherein lies the claim? But we're FDA cleared for anxiety, insomnia, and depression. We don't need to talk about it. We don't need to. We need to solve a problem for humans. We need to find the compelling emotional pull to say, hey, do you have this issue? We have a solution. But we keep it very, very conservative. I run portfolio Wall Street private equity companies for a living. Talk about risk aversion. Lawsuits are no bueno. That's it. Keep it really simple. Don't make claims you can't back up, and then you don't have to worry about the FDA and FTC. It's that simple.
Back up your talk. Easy as that.
I think that there's an interesting clash between, so all of us are sort of in healthcare, and healthcare likes stability, healthcare likes predictability and validity and all of that. And then you've got Silicon Valley, which likes disruption. And disruption is a culture that likes to go in and see opportunity. You see those opportunities as advantages and new markets. And I think that a lot of the technology that originates in the Silicon Valley and other sort of technology centers is inspired by the desire to change and the desire to get out there. And there's an exuberance and a wonderful exuberance about that, but also there's a clash with healthcare that is, likes stability and likes change and incremental improvement and do no harm. So I think that a lot of times the exuberance, and I won't speak to that specific Lumosity example, but I do think that a lot of companies try to get out there and you know, torpedoes be damned, we're going to go out there and disrupt this thing.
I have a couple of thoughts, and I've spent quite a lot of time in advertising. I mean, advertising in its essence is a business concept applied with art. And in advertising, you always, the traditional method is always to look for the product truths, right? You always hear this. And we have a responsibility to communicate those truths. I mean, we shouldn't fear lawsuits. We should do, as you say, you know, and present ourselves in a way that it just isn't even a part of the conversation. I always think back to, there's a film from the, I think it's the late 70s, early 80s called Crazy People, and an advertising exec goes a little bit insane and starts creating ads that are pure truth. Volvo, boxy, but good. And if you remember Volvo in the 70s, that's what it was. And it was funny, but it was successful. And if you think about the most successful advertising campaigns and marketing campaigns, that's all they do. They keep it simple and they keep it truthful. And they back up their claims quite simply. We work really hard to simply present ourselves through independent studies. And truly, we're not like oil and gas companies. They are independent. We haven't funded any of them. So on our website, one of the most prominent parts are, I think there's several scores of independent studies validating the, you know, the measurements that we're taking, the signals that we're creating. So I think it's, we have to go back to sort of the essence of the marketing concept and present those truths, and anything beyond that, we have to be very careful about. We've got a responsibility, especially in wellness. Our responsibility is a very big one. So it's crucial here. We're not selling hairspray.
That's right. It isn't fashion or cosmetics. Absolutely. I think we've got time for one last question before I'd like to open it up to the audience. So one key validation metric is, for any technology, is the adoption. Where do we see the neuro-wellness industry in a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now? And how does that compare to the current state of where things are at? I'll just open that up to the panel.
I'm very excited by industrial applications, particularly in areas where fatigue is and focus. I can't remember where there was a train derailment recently, and it was found out that the engineer was distracted, probably by a phone. But if you think about production lines or intense situations like mining, where focus and avoidance of fatigue, the military, same thing. Those kind of situations, I think, is where a lot of technology is going to be applied. It's one of the fastest growing areas anyway. But I think that's where we're going to start seeing some people who are fascinated by wearables. But I think for the common man, that's probably a little way off. But in industrial scenarios, I think that's going to be very, very interesting, especially where we've got already hard hats. We've got this opportunity already to build in, you know, sensors, all sorts of sensors, whether it's heart rate, neural, or whatever. So I think that's where it's going to start making a real difference. So worker safety, I think, is going to be incredibly interesting.
Great.
Yeah, and I do think we are moving very rapidly towards the personalized medicine approach. And so with our reporting, we always have dual messaging. We have a message for the physician who ordered the test, and then we create a messaging of that same information for the patient. And you know, increasingly now with the cloud portal, we'll have patients uploading their data and reviewing their data themselves with their physician, or sometimes just on their own. So now they know that they've had a change in their sleep architecture. It may be because of diet, or they may just be sleeping better or less stress, and they want to monitor that. So we're able to do that and communicate some fairly technical concepts, but that messaging, you know, it takes time, and you have to talk with patients, and you have to talk with physicians, and sometimes we try to oversimplify it, and that doesn't work either. So I think the messaging and how we approach that, communicating both to the medical professionals as well as the patients themselves, is really important.
Right.
I'm very optimistic. I applaud everybody here. We're all agents of change. We're trying to move inertia, dogma, convention. But I believe through advertising, through movement, through word of mouth, through grassroots, people are fundamentally unimpressed with conventional medical therapy today. That's my belief structure. That's the start. I think we're moving. I think we're going to gain momentum. We're going to continue to gain momentum. The internet is a blessing and a curse, the misinformation highway. But people are starting to figure out, wait a second, I can't believe everything I read or see. And we're starting to become aware. It's starting in the food supply. It's starting, people are understanding stress. And Ariane Huffington taking on the sleep piece. We're starting to see key linchpin influencers moving the dial. I think we're going to go down this curve here, and it's going to really accelerate.
We're adding fuel to the fire, right? People go to the internet to look up their symptoms, and the internet, by virtue of what it is, switching between different screens is creating cognitive load. So we're adding stress to stress.
Yes.
Which is...
And we're stressing out the doctors because we're coming in already self-diagnosed. It's a brilliant model. We're doing the great things.
That's great.
I think the one thing to keep in mind, I mean, I would say overall I'm very optimistic, but I think that getting back to this idea that knowledge is necessary but not sufficient, I think data has to be actionable. And if we, if you look at the data around people getting these wearables, they end up in the drawer in 6 weeks, I think. And so unless we can find a way to make that data meaningful, and I think that's, I guess my take on that about them ending up in the drawer is that once people's lives are fairly stable. Like if I know how I park in the same general place and I walk into my office and I know how many feet it is, I don't need to constantly look at that, and I don't think we want to develop a race of hypochondriacs who are constantly quantifying themselves. But I do think that we want to have actionable ways to make that improve our lives. And so our goal, and I don't think it's in opposition to what you're doing, but our goal is to take that data and then build something around it, make something meaningful that you can come back to, and have that span across your existence from your home to your work, and make your life better, improve the quality of life. And I think if we can do that as a collective group, then we will ensure that we're delivering some value.
It's alter behavior, right?
Absolutely, and I'd say far from being in opposition, it's complementary. In order to affect that change, you need to have that awareness. And so these things I see building on each other very synergistically. And to me, it's very, very reassuring hearing some of these insights, going into different new areas of applications with industry, having more personalized areas, and optimizing different aspects of our life, helping people, being optimistic. It's very promising. So given that we only have a few minutes left, I'd like to open up the question to the audience. And if we have a microphone somewhere that we can go ahead and pass out to. Looks like the coming your way.
Hi, thanks so much. This is regarding health insurance reimbursements. And is there any hope, and what do we have to do to get there?
I think there is hope. I think that the hope is that we're seeing two things. One is the movement towards capitated payments, which is that if you have a condition this is all the government, the Medicare is going to pay. And what that means is that providers need to figure out how to give the best service for that amount. And I think that what we're talking about is more efficient, not more of the same. And also the other hopeful part is that patient satisfaction is now becoming a value-based payments, and patient satisfaction is now becoming a big driver for Medicare, which is, determines a lot of the other behavior for insurance companies. So I think that, billing codes are an issue, but I also think that in capitated payments and where satisfaction is important, those things are going to be less of an issue, and then managed care is also appropriate.
I see it as an economic value proposition. Actuarial scientists are looking at how to extract profit. So if we can go to them and say, here, let's move towards a wellness. We don't need to move towards total prevention. But if we do these 3 or 4 things, we reduce all of the exposure you have. That's how we get their attention. Otherwise, we're too novel. Where's the double blind? Where's the 20 years of studies? They can easily fall behind that veil and say, not interested. And we've seen that. We've knocked on a few of the large healthcare providers' doors and have been met with arrogance and sarcasm.
I think there's where big industry, though, is starting to step in. If you have a large Fortune 500 company and they're self-insured, they can actually If your data suggests that their employees are going to be more healthy and you're going to move some people out of that 20% category that bill for all the health insurance, and you're going to move some of them into the 80% that don't cost the company very much, or if you're a high-risk company like mining or a trucking company where you already have a lot of accidents and incidents and you have some technology that is going to move that dial, they can actually get their private health insurance to cover reimbursement for some of these more novel technologies.
Yeah, you're right. I can't remember the exact number, but stress-related ailments cost businesses billions every year. It's a pretty big number, pretty sort of negative industry. So
Yeah.
you're right that
Productivity,
private industry
yeah.
will probably drive it.
Great.
So I mean, medical reimbursement is the toughest part of medical device industry, and I think everyone would agree with me on that. It can take years. One of our in-home sleep apnea device, it took us 5 years to get Medicare to reimburse. Now, we had private health insurers, all over the country that were willing to reimburse because they saw the value and the benefit and the cost reduction, but that can be very challenging. But I do think you've got industry now where healthcare is more and more a high part of their overall budget, taking a closer look at what does wellness mean, and are there technologies out there that are going to help my employee base thrive and be more productive? That's another way to work the reimbursement problem. Yes, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and some of these companies, though, we've worked with Waste Management, the garbage haulers, and they have an extraordinary database. They know everything about their employees. They know every single employee who is in that 20% group or the 10% group that's costing them. And any change that they institute, they have all the data to see the results of that change. So there are a lot of databases that exist like that, with the Fortune 500 companies. If you can plug into that and get your technology into them, you're sitting on top of some really great statistical information.
Great.
Okay, it's me, I got it. I just have a question to you all, basically, regarding intuition, whether any of you are looking at intuition, if you're integrating it in any way, because it seems, what I'm hearing, and I think you guys confirmed it, in terms of education and adoption, there seems to be an issue with people listening essentially to their intuition, their gut instincts. And I suppose if they were listening or had a vocabulary or there was something that could assist them to alert their attention before they actually even needed to adopt the solutions that you're presenting, that might be assistful in creating more wellness. Anybody?
So it sounds to me like that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that a lot of us, we have our type 1 and type 2 ways of thinking. Either we rely on simply our gut or intuition, or we have kind of more a systematic,
Yes.
analytical,
Right.
cognitive way of assessing things. How can we more influence decisions for these wellness technologies by actually promoting that system 2 type way of thinking?
Right, and if any of you are doing something along the lines of that.
Okay, to take an interesting stab at an interesting question. If you're familiar with Malcolm Gladwell's Blink and the work of Nalini Ambady, decision making is not as rational as we think it is, and it's influenced by a lot of, we tend to make pre-conscious decisions and then use our rational minds to substantiate them. And I think that, in my context of, getting back to this PTSD example, my rational mind would say, I don't want to confront this thing that is really fearful for me. But when we can turn that into an experience, your body, your lizard brain, whatever you want to call it, you go there. And then through the interactions with your therapist, you're able to confront and make some different sense of that, reconstruct those memories, and come out in a better place. And so I think that we can use these technologies. What's really exciting is to make lasting change for people. So plasticity and inspiring some different kinds of brain habits. Intuition is sort of a very interesting way to put it, but I think that if we can bypass in some ways the rational mind
and go straight to experience, I think that we're opening a door.
Great. Anybody else?
I think it probably takes, you're referring to System 1, System 2 thinking, which is a well-researched theory. It's something I think is very, very interesting. So intuition is well informed by a lot of sort of behavioral training and experience. So even though we think it's, it happens in a snap, there's a lot behind it. So it would happen in the inverse, that it's not, it wouldn't drive adoption necessarily. Actually, adoption would help identify how those two systems work hand in hand. I think there's a lot of other things that may come into this to try and detect other sort of thought processes of our minds that are quite interesting. What is creativity? What are those sort of things that seemingly are quite irrational to most people? But even what is logic? How is our brain functioning under these different conditions? What is going on? And that might come back to this sort of concept of, then what is intuition? How does it work? What are the mechanics in our brains that create intuition, and how can it be informed? So it could be a few years down the line, but that would be a very interesting platform to build upon.
Right. Great. Fantastic. Looks like we have another question right here.
I want to go back to the question of adoption, because we were talking about payers and insurance, but the question is really about ROI by industry. So, for example, are there either well-vetted or at least anecdotally interesting studies on, for example, for NeuroWellness in different industries, what the ROI is on that would be compelling enough for a company to say the insurers aren't paying for it, but we're willing to pay for this technology for our employees because there's such a great ROI on their performance on the job?
That's a great question. Specifically to the 7 industries we serve, we don't really come into the ROI question that much. It's really just about the value proposition of what we're trying to do. Let's take stage 4 cancer for a minute. Stage 4 cancer is enveloped in stress, fear, emotional breakdown, psychological breakdown, literally by sympathetic discharge all the time. They're accelerating the end of their life. So the value proposition to that is really simple. We're here to come in and stop the fear, stop the emotional breakdown, stop the psychological breakdown, allow the vagus nerve to activate the heart and the lungs, open up diaphragmatic breathing, allow the body to do what it naturally does, create homeostasis, and thus give you the opportunity to either fight like hell or move on with dignity. It's a very simple value proposition. To an athlete, it's even more simple. Their body is it. So are you sleeping well? No. We will help regulate your circadian rhythm. Are you healing well? No. Well, if we reduce cortisol, we will improve healing, we'll lower inflammation. Very simple value proposition for that. It depends on who we're trying to sell to, where ROI would become important. And obviously, we can walk through, to a medical practice, the ROI is simple because it's fee for service. So either it's patient satisfaction and you derive an ROI there, or it's a fee for service. Here's your cost of goods, here's your cost per application, here's your fee, here's your gross margin.
So understanding that in palliative care or in medical care, there may be different standards, but for example, Chris, you mentioned the data that's in the waste industry. Let me reframe the question. Is that an important avenue to go down on an industry basis to say these wellness technologies outside of care for people who are ill are simply going to improve performance to the point where a company would be insane not to invest in these for their employees?
That's absolute, yes.
Yeah, and I can give you a perfect example. If we talk about something as simple and basic as sleep, we've done many sleep deprivation studies, and we worked with the military and with athletes and looked at changes in sleep cycles, and anything that you can do, whether it's daytime napping, perhaps NeuroWellness, anything that neurofeedback training, mindfulness training, all of these have a great track record now and an entire literature, and no matter what performance metric you look at, whether it's sensory motor, perception, reaction time, executive decision making. So when you're sleep deprived, your ability to make an informed decision is impaired. And if you start a napping protocol or you find a way to get better sleep, we can demonstrate many, many, many quantitative metrics of improved performance, just based on something simple like sleep. and you know, if you're in an industry like mining or trucking where the accidents or the potential for accidents hurting yourself and others is so high, or if you're in the military, every every additional hour or half hour of sleep that you get is going to contribute to a quantitative reduction in the potential for accidents or just simple performance deficits. And that's really well established in the literature. And you can apply it. I mean, we've done this. We've done some models for companies or for individuals on how much adding a nap, for example, a 20-minute nap in the afternoon, how that could quantitatively improve their performance overall. And if it's in a workforce, then you can add that quantitatively and at least model out what you think the ROI will be.
Absolutely. So, I mean, napping improves performance, improves all sorts of intangibles that are even hard to kind of capture, but that nonetheless we know from experiences, and anything that can help us get these things in order and make us sleep better, be less stressed. These are things that make sense. So we're just about out of time. I just want to thank our panelists. They've been fantastic. I could give them all a round of applause. Really appreciate it. And thank you all for the great questions. It's been a great panel.